A very good evening to our viewers. Welcome to today's edition of the Evening Review. My name is Toivon Jebela, your host. Tonight on the show we are joined by Phillip Lühl. He is a Namibian father who has been struggling with his Mexican husband in the Namibian courts to have their children issued with one of their sons rather issued with Namibian identity documents. And last week Phillip wrote an open letter to President Hage Geingob in which he decried the state of affairs and how that is affecting his family. Yeah, thank you, Phillip, for making time, really. I just can't begin to think what you and your family is going through at the moment. How would you describe the mood at home amid all these issues?
The mood at home, with small kids is joyful.
Yeah.
They are happy little children. We are happy to see them grow every day and so on. It is joyful, but of course they can, somewhere also sense the stress that we are under as we are sort of negotiating, our sort of stay here in Namibia at every turn in terms of what we can and cannot do. So I think it is really, the mood is more, somber on our side because of course we know all the implications that, these processes have for us. The kids of course are, doing their things and are generally really happy and happy bunch.
Yeah, your son Yona is 4 years old.
He's 4 years old, yes.
Yeah, does he have any idea what is going on? He's the one whose citizenship is being the big subject of court proceedings, Supreme Court, High Court, Ministry of Home Affairs. Does he have any idea what's going on at all?
No, not at all. We did travel now in December, January for the first time to with the whole family, the 3 children, to Mexico to meet, the other half of the family, everybody there. I think he has now, an idea that Namibia is a place, that it's an actual thing. Yeah. But of course he doesn't know what all of this means, no? But he knows Namibia is a place and Mexico is another place, and the grandmother, the one is here, the other one is there. So he can sort of understand the world in those terms. But of course, we have also never obviously taken the kids with us to court or anything. Yeah. We did last time that when the High Court had the judgment declaring him a Namibian citizen, we did have a celebration and so, but that was when he was sort of 3 years old, perhaps less, 2.5. So he wasn't really aware of any of this.
Yeah, is that partially because also of course, being young is one aspect, but as parents, you wouldn't also want him to know that he's such a subject or a subject of such a huge issue in the country. You would want to protect him.
No, we do, of course, we do want to protect him. We did, from the very beginning, as you've seen, of course, show our children in the media, in photographs and so on. And of course, there might be people that think that is wrong. We did that very consciously, exactly because we want to portray the fact that we're just a simple family. We're just here. We have children. There's nothing to see really, and so that was really the reason why we decided, when all the sort of media attention started, some years ago, to say no. We want people to see that these are children, they're our children, and it's really a normal family. Normal meaning families come in all forms and shapes and sizes, as all of us know just from our personal circumstances, right? So I think that's important for us. But of course, you are right. We obviously want to protect the children from, being harmed in any way. Yeah. And luckily, that has never happened.
The bone of contention here, Phillip, is that you are a gay couple, and that has been sort of the authorities saying, but first they were asking, for example, DNA proof that you are the father, and all these kind of things. And you had won, like you said, a court ruling in your favor that said Yona must now get citizenship, and then government appealed in the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court ruled in favor of government. Where does that leave you as a family, especially in regards to Yona?
So, of course, when we started this case, when he was, literally a few weeks old, we lodged the application for citizenship. Back then, he was really stateless, because a lot of people believe that because he was born in South Africa, he has South African citizenship. It's not the case, because both of us don't have South African citizenship. He has a South African birth certificate that states both of us as parents, but he did not have any citizenship at the time. His other father is Mexican, and so he also has the right to Mexican citizenship. But at the time, that was not easy to get done either. So he was stateless, and so we really relied on this, to have a positive outcome to prevent him being stateless. 2 years later, when we had the debacle then with our twins that were pretty much in the same, situation, where Home Affairs did not allow them entry into the country, we, in the very last minute, when just before finally Home Affairs gave in to allow the twins back into the country, they also issued a sort of refugee passport to Yona for him to be able to get to the Mexican embassy in Pretoria. And so we managed, after also quite a struggle with the Mexican authorities, to get Mexican citizenship and passports for all the 3 children. So from that moment on, they were no longer stateless, and at least that really existential threat, if you like, was moved out of the way. But yet the case was still pending before the High Court then, and then of course after the initial success and then the appeal of government, we obviously just had to wait for this process to run its course.
Yeah. And the twins, the girls, what is their citizenship status at the moment?
So
in Namibia.
In Namibia, because the situation is exactly the same as in the case of Yona, we essentially, once they came to the country, we did exactly the same, applied for citizenship by descent, which we also had done in Yona's case. On advice of the Namibian High Commission at the time, they told us, look, if this is your situation, you get an emergency travel document, you bring the children to Namibia, and then you apply for citizenship by descent here. Because if we had done that in South Africa, we would have had to wait there for the outcome, which could have now, as you see, been years that we would have been stuck in South Africa. So that was advice of the High Commission, and that advice was also again confirmed by Home Affairs officials even after the Supreme Court a judgment recently that said we had followed the wrong process. Home Affairs officials told us, no, that's the process that we follow in the case where children are born outside of the country.
I see. And that letter that I referred to in the intro is an open letter to President Hage Geingob. You raised a lot of issues related to how your family is being affected and how you feel that all this treatment is really rooted in the fact that you are gay. Has there been any reaction, formal reaction, maybe from the State House or from anywhere to your letter? No,
unfortunately not. I did also, separately from sending it to the media, I did send the actual letter to State House, and the confirmed receipt, literally with those 2 words. But of course that was just an administrative confirmation. After that, there has been no further communication. And really, that letter was meant to highlight, in fact, the impossibility of this situation.
Yeah.
The reality is we are being sent from A to B and back to A again. It's really been a merry-go-round, and all along the state, the government is sitting on the fence, pretending that there's no problem around LGBTQ issues, right? And that is often based on sort of this idea that, oh, it's not as bad as, countries like Uganda, where you now have, a bill in front of, to be signed by the president that proposes a death penalty, mind you, right? Now, that might be true. Of course, in Namibia, we are not in that situation. But the fact that these laws are not, or people are not actively persecuted, does not take away the fact that, the existence of things like the sodomy law and others do have a real impact for Namibians, right? In my case, and a couple of other couples that are married to non-Namibians, the particular effect is that our partners cannot be in this country if they don't have, a work permit or something. So they're constantly reliant on some external factors to be able to be here. Now, Home Affairs, even though for me to prove paternity wanted a DNA proof, as soon as the children got the Mexican passport, suddenly Home Affairs decided, oh, then they must be Guillermo's children, right? Because he's a Mexican father. They didn't do a DNA test either, but suddenly that logic doesn't apply anymore. Now they're saying it's his children. So the children, the temporary residence permits are now linked to his permit. So you can see how, there's a constant confusion about the own logic, because the logic doesn't stand. It doesn't stand constitutional muster to say, certain people are treated in a certain way and certain people are treated in another way. I mean, we know we come from that history, and that is why our constitution is written in the way that it is, which is that, there shall be equality for all, despite, differences in race, gender, all the other things. Now, the mere fact that sexual orientation isn't listed there cannot mean that we can now continue discriminating based on sexual orientation, right? Because there's a whole lot of other things that are also not listed there that we also not discriminating against, simply because they're not explicitly named. So, so that is really, I think, for me, the crux of the matter. There's real impact in people's lives, and of course, a whole lot of Namibians that, unlike us, do not have an alternative home, right? Yeah. I am very well aware of the immense privilege from which I come to actually have another place in the world that, well, my husband is from there, that, we have very strong connections that that we could call home, right? But a lot of our compatriots don't have that. You have, you're stuck in Namibia as a second-class citizen.
Yeah, absolutely. We go for a quick break and then return for the last part of the show.
NMH at 1 brings you news from all corners of Namibia. NMH at 1 aims to reach viewers countrywide who are interested in current affairs in a short and sweet format. This show is broadcasted on NTV, oneup2.com, and cross-shared on the following Facebook platforms: The Republican, Algemeine Zeitung, Namibian Sun, Namibia Media Holdings, Irongo, and Vindic Express. To share your news or advertise on this platform, contact nmh1@synergy.com.na. NMH at 1, your lunchtime news companion.
Our conversation continues on the show. Philip, apart from the letter, have you considered at all meeting the president in person and say, look, Mr. President, I'm a child of this country, and just because I'm different from the person A or B doesn't make me less of a citizen? Can you look into my situation? Is that a possibility?
Well, I mean, reaching out to the head of state, of course, was a last resort, because we have reached out to the ministry, trying to get an audience with the executive director, or alternatively the minister, since October last year, when it became clear that this situation is not being resolved, that the third application for permanent residence by my husband is not being considered, which, by the way, would be the easiest way out for government to not acknowledge anything relating to our, to our relationship, because permanent residence is simply granted if you meet the requirements, having been in this country for a long time and having done, X, Y, Z. So, and even that is not forthcoming. So we have, sought audience. That has not happened. After the Supreme Court hearing or judgment recently, Home Affairs offered us a meeting, a high-level meeting, where we can discuss all the various issues all together, because they all have implications for each other. The residence status of my husband, the previous Supreme Court judgment in his case, which was about domicile, which was handed down a year ago and has had no consequence. No action flowed from that judgment. Home Affairs has not sent us a letter. They have not revisited their decision, which the Supreme Court had set aside. So here we have a dysfunctional state where simply the Supreme Court does something and no action follows from that, which is problematic, of course. So we wanted to deal with all these issues together, and that simply hasn't happened, while the authorities know fully well that my husband's work permit and our children's permits that are now linked to this are expiring in less than 2 weeks. So there's no urgency, and it really feels as if there's a pattern of trying to frustrate us, to basically just without government taking a position to say, like, no, look, we don't allow this, right?
Yeah.
Which would be a position, but that position isn't being taken, and that was why for me the feeling was the last resort is to write to the head of state saying, like, this is what it is.
Yeah.
Equality does not exist until it is actually, accessible to all, and government must come off the fence. We can no longer pretend that there are no issues. And in the actual letter that I sent to State House, I did add a line to say, like, well, I would be happy to engage, personally on this, and of course, I'm here. I did previously try informally to reach out to the head of state. That was also a couple of months ago, didn't bear any fruit. So yes, I don't think it's that easy to get the attention, but that's why I just decided that I would have to take this step publicly.
Yeah. Last year, the president, I think it was at the opening of Parliament, or I can't remember what the occasion was, but he did actually urge Parliament to scrap away laws that discriminate people on many issues, including gender and sexuality, saying that those laws no longer have a place in a country like ours. When that kind of message comes from the highest office in the country, does it give you some hope? And maybe that your situation is just that maybe the pace at which his instruction is being implemented is slow, but is there some hope of for people like yourself in that?
I think generally, of course, there's hope, because we have seen in the past 20 years how the world has changed and continues to change. I think there's a narrative that Western countries are very permissive. I mean, this was a struggle in each and every country of this globe, and it's just like you say, the pace is a little bit quicker in other countries. But so the world is changing, and also Namibia will change. I'm very certain of that. I do agree that we might be in a moment where, there's sort of push and pull in different directions, within which we find ourselves stuck. Regarding the president's statement, I know at the time it was reported, in the light that you just stated it. In my recollection, he didn't talk about sexuality at all. He talked about gender. And sex, all these things are in the Constitution. The Supreme Court, of course, and even the government, the Attorney General, is arguing that sex, as it is argued in other countries, that sex includes sexual orientation. They rejected that argument. So I think people wanted to read a very positive note into the president's statement, which I didn't see. I didn't see evidence of. And it could be that he was overtly cautious, not to ruffle any feathers. But for me, it is part of this pattern of sitting on the fence, of not actually stating explicitly to say, look, our constitution that he himself was the chairperson of, of drafting, states that there shall be equality for all. And that is, for me, where it is simply an unfinished business. And it is, again, very disappointing that neither Parliament nor the executive, sees any urgency. And furthermore, disappointing that now it becomes very clear that our Supreme Court, who would be the guardian of, minority rights, is also not willing to take a position, but sending us back to fill another form, which they know fully well is not going to bring relief. So, so you can see how all the organs of the state are not taking any, concerted effort or steps. And that is why also in my letter we refer to this as state-sanctioned homophobia. It is state-sanctioned. It is no longer something that lingers. It is really the state taking a position without formulating it as such. Yeah. Because of course, probably, government does not want to be seen on the international sort of arena to be, suppressing rights of certain groups. But that is really what is happening.
Yeah. Do you think that, in your experience, because you are constantly in court, fighting this battle for yourselves, for your children, for your family, do you think that sometimes that you are perhaps barking at the wrong or up a wrong tree? The Supreme Court would say, oh, but we do not have, because I remember there were some very good judgments by the courts where they have said, look, I don't know whether it was in your specific case or in other cases, but I think it was in your specific case, in one of your court challenges, where the judges really said, look, we can no longer, we do not, as judges, we have nothing to work with to rule in your favor, but they sort of say to the state or to the government that this can no longer be sustained. Do you think perhaps Parliament, being the body that makes laws, is more of the appropriate body to actually talk to?
Unfortunately, I don't believe so, for two reasons. For the reason that hardly any political party has really taken a firm position on this, certainly not the ruling party. But also in terms of the opposition parties, there have been some sort of very vague statements, but it has not become a clear policy position. So that's the one. So in the in the medium term, I do not see any relief from there. The second reason is that minority rights should not be legislated by majority opinion. They're simply, the rights exist already. They are there. They're in the Constitution. We cannot debate that. It's been stated. We now just have to give effect to those rights. That's what's missing, and that is why we did, of course, starting out this fight, did believe that having a strong constitution, having these rights in principle, we would have a case. But if it now becomes clear, and that is something that perhaps we were naive about, is that if you don't have a Supreme Court, the guardian of the Constitution, the guardian of the Bill of Rights, that is prepared to actually interpret what that Constitution really means. If it doesn't perform that function, then there's no institution that is actually going to have our back. And that is really unfortunate. I mean, you can see in contrast how the South African Constitutional Court has really used its powers to expand the notion of freedom and equality. Because there was such an urgent sense that we can never again be in a situation where we treat citizens differently based on these arbitrary sort of things that really have nothing to do with the state. Yeah. So, but our Supreme Court clearly doesn't have that sort of position, and so that's where it. I think that is something that is only dawning on us now. Like the year ago, the judgment in my husband's case about the domicile was disappointing enough because the court acknowledged that he was treated unfairly, but simply sent us back to Home Affairs to revisit its decision, without providing any guidance based on which other facts or matters they should arrive at a different decision, meaning that we all know fully well, and Home Affairs knew, that they would revisit the decision based on the same facts before them, and they would come to the same conclusion, meaning that, you know, we have gained nothing. And because of that judgment being so, you know, surprisingly useless, nothing has happened. Home Affairs has not taken any steps. We cannot claim anything. So it is really, in my mind, it's a sign of a dysfunctional state. Is that, you know, in this case, the Supreme Court is not doing what it needs to do. The case that you were referring to is not in our case. It was in the case brought by separate other couples who are also a Namibian South African couple and a Namibian German couple. And in that case, the High Court, you know, looked at and it is about the recognition of their foreign same-sex marriage, again for the partners of the Namibian citizens to be able to simply live in this country, like any other, you know, non-Namibian who is married to a Namibian would be. So that's really the crux of that case. And in that case, the High Court said, look, we are bound by a 2001 Supreme Court judgment that said, you know, homosexual relationships are not sanctioned in this country. But we don't agree with that judgment. We believe the Supreme Court, which is the apex court, has to revise its previous judgment. And then they laid out a whole long list of reasons why that is so. Now, obviously, the case was lost, but actually then the defendants went and appealed, and that is now also before the Supreme Court. And now the Supreme Court has to essentially take a position on that. After our own judgment, I'm less hopeful, unfortunately, that they will do so. So yes, there are, you know, some progressive tendencies in this particular issue, but they are not yet well established at the, you know, at the Supreme Court level, and therefore do not really have much effect yet.
Absolutely, Philip. It was nice having you on the show.
Thank you.
Please, all the best with your case, and we'll be monitoring the situation.
Thank you.
Yes, that was Phillip Lühl. He's a father, and he is just fighting for the right of his child to have the right to stay actually in this country, and that is his story. Thank you for watching.